Hi! On today's episode, I'm going to show you some finished objects as well as showing you some interesting tips for weaving in your ends. So grab your knitting and let's go have some fun. Hi everyone! Thanks for joining me today, and if you are a new viewer, welcome and thanks for checking me out. And if you are a returning viewer, I appreciate you coming back and supporting my channel. I am Jessie Pellet, also known as That Minnesota Yarn Girl, and as you might have guessed, I live in Minnesota with my husband Mike, my son Thaden, and our two adorable kitties, Zuli and Mia. First of all, before I jump in, I just want to apologize. I realize I am a little bit later than usual getting this out to you, but I was sick last week with a horrible cough and just didn't feel like recording a podcast. But let's get going with I've got some great things to share. Alright, so the first thing I have to share with you is a couple finished objects. I am super excited. So my first one is the Water Lily sweater, which, as I had mentioned last time, I knew I was going to get completed because I did have a party that I wanted to wear this to, and I did get it completed in time to wear to our friend's housewarming party. And guys, I love this sweater. I love the way it turned out. I'll pop up a picture, but I think it fits me really, really nicely. And I'm just so pleased with the lace and how the lace turned out. And also I just love the drape of the sweater. I just think it is a great piece. It's perfect for, like I said, I wore it to a housewarming party. I also wore it last night to happy hour with my girlfriends. So it's a great kind of going out sweater that you can wear. It was a little chillier last night, so I did wear a coat with it as well. But it's not your like grandma's sweater, I guess, if you will. I feel really good in this sweater, and I absolutely love it. A couple things to note about the pattern. The lace pattern, it was a pretty simple pattern itself, except that I did feel like it wasn't super descriptive because when you have to divide for the yoke for each side, it wasn't very descriptive on where exactly because you're repeating your lace pattern, and it didn't exactly always describe like where to stop and how to start. So then, especially because you're doing decreases along the edge, so it got a little bit, it definitely involved some thinking because I knew I had to do decreases, and because it's a lace pattern, there are increases and decreases throughout the repeats, so then I would have to think through to myself, how am I going to end up with the overall correct number of stitches and keep it in pattern up until the very end. So it didn't, I mean, there was a lot of kind of guesswork to go into that, which, I didn't mind. I like a good challenge, but if I didn't want to have to figure that out, I might have been a little bit irritated with that particular part of the pattern. And I realize it's got to be really hard to write that up because obviously different sizes they're going to end at different spots. So you don't want to, I'm sure, it's hard to think through every single size and figure out exactly where you're going to start and end. And I'm guessing that most people taking on a lace pattern on a garment like this are going to be relatively experienced knitters. So I'm assuming that, that's probably what, it was Megan Fernandez who designed it. I'm sure that's what she was thinking when she designed it. And like I said, it wasn't like terrible. It just, it did require some thought as I decreased. The back was really easy to do because there really wasn't much decreasing in that. And then I really didn't make any modifications other than I did add some length to it, which I'm really glad I did, because I like a longer sweater. And I just, you know, don't want there to be any chance of showing off more skin than I would care to. So I like a little bit of a longer top. And so, which is another great thing about making your own garments, is because you can make those choices for yourself. And I knew that I was gonna have a lot of yarn left, just because the size that I was knitting was the first. So the size right below it required 2 skeins of yarn, and then the size I chose to knit required 3, and then I ended up halfway through that was, I guess, another modification I did make, is like when I got to, I think it was about here, I kind of tried it on and realized it was way wider than I necessarily would need on top, and so then I decreased and then went with the size below. So I knew I was gonna have plenty of yarn left over, and so that making that extra length, I think I added about maybe 3 to 4 inches on it, because let's see, yeah, about 4 inches. So I made it about 4 inches longer than it was written for. And like I said, I have plenty of yarn. In fact, I still have, I think, more than half a skein left over. So plenty of yarn. And I just think that, and also I think that where I did the decrease also really helped, because I do have wider hips. So it really just worked for it to flow really nicely on me. And I am just super excited. I could not be happier with the end results of this. And even though now it's getting cooler out and I'm not gonna be able to wear it as much, like I said, I did wear it with a jacket last night. So I think it's still something that, throw a shawl or a jacket or something over it and I can still wear this. Although it probably will be more primarily a summer or warmer weather top, but it is something that I will have next year to wear as well. So really love this sweater. Again, this is the Water Lily sweater by Megan Fernandez, and the yarn was Kettle Yarn Co. Islington. Why do I keep saying Islington? Islington, and the colorway is Old Smoke. So this, again, I really love it. I'm super excited. And this lace part, even though, like I said, it got a little frustrating, frustrating is probably not the right word, but it took a little bit more thought when I got to this, when I got to the dividing for the neck. I still really enjoyed the lace part of it. Like I said, it was a relatively intuitive lace pattern once you got going on it, and it turned out beautiful, and I really love it. So that is my Water Lily sweater, which is now done and off the needles. Yay! That was very exciting. Okay, so my next finished object is the Camela Hat. And if you saw my last podcast, you would have seen that I had asked for your opinion on which color combo to knit with, because this color combo is the Indian corn and this green color by Lavender Lune Yarn Co. The green didn't have a name. And then the other color combo I was debating on using was Poppin Maize, and then the Indian corn color would be the background color. And the internet, you guys, the internet was no help. When I posted it on Instagram, the Poppin Maize color combo with the Indian corn had just a slightly higher vote count than the Indian corn and the green colorway, but then those that posted on YouTube had said that they liked the Indian corn and the green together. So it was kind of oh, and the ones that, even though on Instagram the Poppin Maize one, it was still just barely, just by a few more votes. So it was so close. And I knew I might have enough yarn to make both. So of course, my husband Mike, being the logical person that he is, he said, well, because the Indian corn is used in both the hats, he said, you start with the one that uses the most Indian corn, and then you'll know if you have enough for the second hat. And so that's what I did. I cast on this hat, this the Indian corn and green, because the Indian corn is the main color in this hat, you cast on with it, and then you knit the first row in the main color, and then the rest of it's pretty equal. So it really uses a pretty equal amount, but just because there's like 2 more rows of the Indian corn in this color combo, that's what I did. I started with this one, and luckily I do have enough to start and do another hat in the Poppin Maize and Indian corn color combo. So I'm really excited about that. And this hat was a lot of fun to knit up, you guys. Like I said, this was my first brioche project. I did do some practicing at brioche before I cast this on, so by the time I cast this on, I felt like I had the brioche stitch down pretty well, and there's only one type of increase and one type of decrease, so it wasn't too scary to knit at all. It was it went pretty well, and I really enjoyed it, and I love the way that this turned out. I really enjoyed it. I got to wear it last weekend when we went for a hike. It was just a little bit chilly, and it was perfect for the hike, and like I said, I really enjoyed it, and I think Thaden is already planning on stealing it because he loves these bright colors. So but that's okay, because then I'll have the other color combo to wear when that one is done. One thing I did do when I cast this on was I did notice that even though the pattern starts with, I think it's a German twist, so cast on, so it's a little bit stretchier than your typical cast on, it was still, when I was working it the first few times, it was still just not stretchy enough. Like, it would be really tight around my forehead. So I cast on using 2 size 6 needles. This is knit up in a size 4, so I cast it on using 2 size 6 needles held together, and then I just cast around 2 of them together, and then I did my first knit row in that what do you call it, I did that first knit row in the size 6 needle, and then switched to the size 4 needle for the rest of the hat, and I think that worked perfectly. And then the brim was stretchy enough, and then the rest of the hat still was in the correct gauge size. So I really do love this hat, and I'm excited to knit up the second color and practice more brioche. One thing I do recommend with if you're gonna do brioche is lifelines. If you don't know what a lifeline is, it's just when you take a needle and you thread some scrap yarn underneath your stitches, and this is really helpful in brioche because I did find, especially being new to brioche, I found it kind of difficult if I had to, like, if I dropped a stitch, or you know, if for whatever, like, yeah, I mean, even just dropping a stitch, it's really hard to kind of figure out how to pick it back up, since you almost have like 2 rows when you're making brioche. You have your main color and then your second color. You have 2 different colors making up 1 row, and so again, not being a super experienced brioche knitter, it was really hard to figure out how those yarns of the 2 different colors are supposed to fit together. So having that lifeline in was a really good way if I did drop a stitch. I mean, I hate having to go back, but at least then I had a spot where I could go back to and didn't have to start it all over. So for me, lifelines were key. Also, don't use the same color of lifeline as your hat. My scrap yarn is like this bright green color because most of the time I don't knit with that. I had to switch to pink because it was really annoying. But that is what I would suggest if you're working brioche, especially for the first time. But yes, loved this hat. It was a lot of fun. Again, this pattern is Camella by Katrin Shubert, and the yarn was Indian corn, and there's no name for the green color, by Lavender Lune Yarn Co. Loved that. So much fun. So now that is it for finished objects. So let's move on to works in progress. Just a good segue, as I mentioned, I am planning on doing the Camela hat in the Poppin Maize and Indian corn as the background color. So here is that. So I've already started it. Being that I've already talked about this hat to death, I don't really need to say a whole ton about it. other than, again, here is this color combo and the brim. I've only got the brim done so far. And the one different thing I'm going to do with this one, rather than, I started off again with the same size 6 needles held together. The only difference is this time I'm using a size 3 needle for the hat. One reason for that, the biggest reason, is just because this hat was maybe a little bit bigger, a little bit slouchier than I like my beanie hats. I like my beanie hats to be like nice and snug and tight. So I switched to a size 6 needle, or a size 3 needle, just to get this one a tiny bit snugger. But also because I'm using my size 4 needles for my Harley project, which I will now show you. So as I said, that's the Camela hat. Love it. Super excited to get that second hat off the needles so that I can have my hat, because like I said, I'm pretty sure Thaden is going to steal my green and Indian corn colored hat. So now Harley. Harley is living in this bag that I got from Needle & Skein and Southwest Yarn Quest, and I feel like it's just perfect for fall because it has the fall colors on there, and you know, it's got the outdoor theme. I'm an outdoor person, so I love this bag. And the bag is by Bags by Awesome Granny, and it says respect your knitting. There's a little tag here that says respect your knitting, which I love because I feel like that is what the project bags are there for, right? They are there so that you respect your knitting, so that you, because otherwise when I don't have a project bag, my project gets scattered all over the house. So this is Harley. I did start this. This is going to be my Rhinebeck sweater, so I am super excited about this. I have not gotten too far on it, but I have done I've started on the cable collar, and I love the way this color is turning out and the way that these cables are turning out. You can see I have a few lifelines in here. I am, I don't know if you're following my other videos, but I am also working on getting my Master Knitter Level 1 completed, and this week was that I'm working on my cables, which kind of worked out perfectly since this collar is all cables. But I noticed that my tension is off when I do cables. What I'm coming to learn is that every cable pattern is different, because even though for the Master Knitter course I'm using the same yarn but doing different cable patterns for my swatches, and I'm noticing that each swatch, I'm struggling with tension all over, but each one has the different areas of where the tension is an issue for me. So what I did when I started working on this one is I kind of started taking notes as to how I'm executing the stitches. So one of the best ways to fix the tension in cabling is that when you switch from a knit stitch to a purl stitch, you put your yarn underneath your needle. So it's kind of like you're purling I want to say upside down, but it's not really upside down, but you're just putting your yarn under rather than over your needle, which pulls it a little bit tighter. So that's one way that you can fix your tension in cabling. But like I said, I've kind of found that it depends on where, like some of the cables I need to do it before, some of them I need to do it after. I'm just kind of having a little bit of issue, particularly on this pattern, figuring out where the tension problem is. And the tension problem is not so bad that I'm planning on re-knitting it, because I am thrilled with the way that this collar portion is turning out. From the right side, it looks just fine to me. But from the back side, I can see that some of the stitches look a little bit larger. There's a little bit of ladders in between them. And so it's just on that side, or it's just, so then I know that my tension is not perfect. And being the perfectionist that I am, I'm just trying to kind of try and figure out as I go along where the issues are, which is why I'm taking notes on each section and how I was changing it up a little bit to try and perfect the tension, but again, not being so worrisome about it that I'm going to start over or anything like that, because I am perfectly happy with the way that these cables are turning out on the collar. And like I said, I absolutely love this color and the way that it looks with the cables. I'm really excited to see this completed. So what you do is you work the collar first, and then you seam it together, I think. I can't remember. But anyways, you pick up the stitches once the collar is worked. And so so hopefully I will get this collar completed by the end of the weekend, and then I can start on the body of the sweater, because got a timeline on this one if I'm going to wear it to Rhinebeck. So this is my Harley sweater. The pattern is by Jenny Williams, and the yarn that I'm using is Malabrigo Rios, and this particular color is Sunset. And then I'm going to add in a couple other colors, Flama and Diana. So that is my Harley sweater. Super excited. I'm absolutely loving that one. So that is that one. Moving on to my next work in progress, which I have talked about on the podcast before, but it has been quite some time, because I'm not as thrilled about this one. This is Thaden's sock. He loves his bright colors, so the orange and the pink, and then the contrasting neon green heel. Guys, this is the color that I usually use for my lifeline, and he saw me using it. He's like, can you put that as the heel on my sock, or the heel and the toe on my sock? And so I have plenty of it, so even though it's my scrap yarn, I have plenty, so I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. But I finished most of the first sock. I still haven't put the heel in, because I think I'll do that when I finish the other one. I will do the heels together at the same time. So this sock is pretty much, the first one is pretty much done, and the second one has been sitting in the project bag for like a month, more or less untouched. I'm just not enjoying this one as much, because in all honesty, I'm not enjoying the striping in the round, particularly on such a small, on a sock. And I have been bringing the yarn up the side, you know, what you would typically do, and then I watched a video or a blog post somewhere saying that, like, well, in knitting in the round, you shouldn't really be bringing the yarn up the side, even if it is striped, because you're going to mess with your tension. And after I saw that, and I kind of looked back at my other sock and realized, like, yeah, no, the tension's not great. But I'm going to continue doing it, because I did it on the one, and I just feel like I feel like it has to be symmetrical, even if it's not ideal. So I will continue that with this one. This will be the last pair of socks that I knit with stripes, because I just am not, like I said, really not enjoying the process. I mean, it's garter stitch. It should be super, or stockinette stitch. It should be super easy to just sit down in front of the TV and knit, but I'm not really into it. However, next week is Thaden's birthday, and I thought, okay, that really should be my deadline. Even though, I mean, I know no 13-year-old boy wants to get a pair of socks for their birthday. However, it's not going to be his main present, and I thought it would just be something fun to kind of give to him alongside his other gifts. So I thought, okay, and it's a good deadline. So I've decided that I counted up how many stripes I have on this one, and I have about 16 stripes left for this one, and I thought 2 stripes a day. It won't take long, half hour maybe. I can do 2 stripes a day for the next week and a half, and then I'll put the heels in on the same day, block them, and then they should be all ready to go by his birthday. So that is my plan. 2 stripes a day, and I can get done with that. And then I can move on to some socks. I bought some self-striping yarn so that I can still get the nice look of stripes in socks, but I don't have to actually worry about the multiple balls of yarn and how to weave in ends and all of that not always so fun jazz. So that is my plan, to get these done so I can start on a pair of self-striping socks for myself, and that I can have these done for Thaden's birthday next week. So that is that, and these are just a plain vanilla sock, not really following any particular pattern, and the yarn is, I think it's AbacusDyeworks is this Sun-Kissed Orange, and no, sorry, the Sun-Kissed Orange is by DippinDawns, and AbacusDyeworks has this pink, and I am blanking on the name of the pink color right now. But so that is the socks. That's what I've got for works in progress and finished objects today. As I'm sure you know, I love knitting, and it is not something to be feared, and I don't want you to be afraid of it either. So my goal with the Improve Along is to encourage everyone to try something new. So every month I will pick a different topic to explore and try and improve on. So even if you've done it before, we can all use room for improvement, right? Maybe pick something that is a little extra challenging within that topic. And then I will be picking I'm not sure what I'm going to give as a prize, but I will be picking a couple prize winners probably in December throughout the various threads on the Improve Along topics from when I started last month in August all the way through to the end of December. So this month the topic is brioche, and as I mentioned, I did work on my first brioche project this month, and it was a lot of fun. If you are looking for other brioche projects to work on, I found some beautiful patterns by Lavanya Patricella. I hope I pronounced that name correctly, but she has gorgeous brioche projects, like tons of beautiful patterns, and she has one beginner cowl, so it looks like it would be a perfect thing to start out with if you've never done brioche before. She also has a bandana that it can be done in various weights of yarn, fingering, DK, and worsted. And it looks like another really fun pattern. My favorite brioche project of hers is the Chunky Brioche Cowl, I think it was called. And I added this to my queue for this winter, I think, because it just looks like so much fun. And it's done in, again, obviously chunky yarn, so it's obviously going to be a pretty quick knit, and I feel like it would be a great thing to work on in the winter time and just have a nice, bulky knit poncho to wear with some leggings when I'm just kind of lounging around the house one day. So I am really looking forward to working on this. Like I said, it is in my Ravelry queue now. I absolutely love it, and you should definitely check out her patterns because she has tons of really fun brioche patterns, tons of other patterns as well, but love the brioche. All of her patterns were really highly rated. I'm on Ravelry. I haven't knit any of them myself, although like I said, one of them is in my queue now, but all of them were very highly rated, and I strongly suggest checking those out. So that is the Improve Along. I would love to hear from you on what you guys are working on and see some Improve Along projects that you might have picked out and or are in the midst of. And also, if you have an idea for next month's topic, please let me know, because I'm not really sure yet what the topic should be for next month, and I just want to hear from you. And if there's something that you are looking to try and would like to have a community of others try it along with you, then let us know, and we will go from there and pick a new topic for next month. So love to hear from you guys. right, moving on to Knitflixing. And Knitflixing is the segment where I talk about binge watching TV while knitting. And I have, in the past, I've talked about shows and like what kinds of patterns you could knit on while you watch these shows. And I've thought about it a little bit recently because I've heard a lot of people say, well, this project is great for TV knitting. And I kind of thought, I'm like, well, I'm always, if I'm in front of the TV, I'm knitting. And I knit on all of my projects in front of the TV. So I sat down and thought about it a little bit more. And I thought, you know what? Really, if you think about it, I feel like, to me, all projects are TV projects. However, there are two types of TV shows in my mind. There are the types of TV shows that are the background TV shows, and knitting is what I'm more focused on and just kind of listening and while watching. And then there are the types of TV shows that I am watching more intently, and knitting is the background, in which case I'm probably just going to be doing a stockinette pattern. I'm not going to be working on lace. I'm not going to be working on something that's a little bit more involved. So I've decided that from now on, going forward, I'm going to label a TV show as either a background TV show or as a knitting background TV show. So the background TV show means that I'm knitting on whatever I want, and I have the TV on in the background, or is just something to kind of listen to have something on in the background, as I said, in the background, noise, whatever, something that I might only half be following along. Or the other way around, where knitting is the background and I'm really focused on the TV show, but I might be just knitting to keep my hands busy. So the first show I want to talk about is Game of Thrones, because this is probably one of my favorite TV shows. It is my all-time favorite book series, but I also love the TV show. But obviously, if you've watched Game of Thrones, you know that Game of Thrones is going to be a knitting in the background TV show. You cannot watch Game of Thrones and try to be even slightly focused on something else. And sometimes even when I'm watching Game of Thrones, I do have to put my knitting down because it does get a little bit intense. There are so many different characters, but like I said, it is one of my all-time favorite TV shows because mostly because the books are my all-time favorite books ever. And the show, although now it's starting to deviate from the books, the first few seasons do follow along pretty closely with the books, and the characters are phenomenal. And I have not watched Game of Thrones in ages because obviously it hasn't been new in ages. But I'm like, where is my next season? And it turns out that I just was looking this up the other day. They've just started filming the next season. So unfortunately, we're not going to have another episode of Game of Thrones for a while yet. But it is, like I said, one of my favorite shows. I am such a huge fantasy nerd, and I love Game of Thrones. But again, it is not something that you're going to want to knit on a hard pattern. Fade socks would be perfect in front of Game of Thrones because you can't focus on anything else while watching it. So, not sure when my next season is going to be out, not till 2019 sometime, but I do love some Game of Thrones. The next show that I want to talk about is a background show where knitting is the primary task, and that show is Pretty Little Liars. Thaden and I just stumbled upon this one on Netflix a few weeks back, and we've just been watching it, and it's an okay show. I don't love it, but I don't hate it, and it's great to have it on in the background. It's, just a TV series about teenagers, and I think they're being stalked by someone they don't know. 4 girls being stalked by someone that they don't know, and their girlfriend was murdered a summer before, so the stalker may or may not have killed their their girlfriend, they don't know, there's kind of all this mystery, and like I said, it's my husband hears it in the background and he calls it a soap opera, and more or less it is a soap opera. But again, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but it is entertaining, and there's definitely worse TV out there, and it is perfect to have on in the background while I'm knitting on something maybe a little more complicated. Just like to sometimes be able to listen along and follow along while I'm knitting on something. And so Pretty Little Liars is it's just kind of a great show for that. So that is Knitflixing, and I want to hear from you guys. What do you like to binge watch while you watch or while you're knitting? And is it for you? Is it something that you have on in the background, or is the knitting more of the background? You're just keeping your hands busy as you watch something. So love to hear from you guys. So please comment below and let me know. Alright, moving on to Knit Happens. So I couldn't really find any like new fun current events or anything like that this week, but I did find a new blog on the benefits of knitting. And I know that I've already touched on this before, but it's such a thing that I am so passionate about that this is probably not even going to be the last time that I touch on this topic, because it really excites me. I mean, I know how much I benefit from knitting, and so it's just more evidence for that. So I stumbled upon this blog post by Sarah McKay, who is a neuroscientist. And in this blog post, she talks about the reasons that knitting is beneficial. And so, forgive me guys, but I have to have my show notes in front of me because there's no way that I could remember these. But she does state that, obviously, as you know, because you knit, crafting and knitting in particular is really good for people mentally, and it's stimulating, and she mentions particularly that it's great to craft and knit with friends. Here are her top 10 reasons why knitting benefits us. So it's mental challenge and problem solving. We know how that goes. You drop a stitch, you have to solve a problem. Social connection, again, working when you're doing, a stitch and bitch or some other form of being out there and socializing while knitting. Mindfulness. Development of hand-eye coordination, spatial awareness and fine motor dexterity, learning and teaching, focusing attention and thoughts on a task, encouraging active creativity, gives a sense of pride and achievement. Don't we all know that when we finish a project, we feel so great about it? Teaches patience and perseverance. This is a funny one to me because people think, like, they say, oh, I could never knit, I don't have enough patience. But recently I feel like it's the patience, like I can be more patient sometimes, because if I'm irritated waiting for something, I just pull out my knitting and then I don't care how long I have to wait. So yeah, it teaches patience, but it also just calms you down when you do have to be patient. And then the last one is facilitates memory formation and retrieval. So I thought that this was great because I think the last time I talked about, I had put up an article about, or I had referred to an article about how knitting benefits you, but it didn't give the whys behind it. So I really like that she kind of just breaks it down and talks about the different reasoning behind why it's so beneficial for us. And then one other really interesting little tidbit that she threw in her blog post was that Albert Einstein apparently was known for knitting in between his projects because, quote, it calmed his mind and cleared his thinking. So I mean, it's just great. So the next time someone gives you a hard time about knitting, just be like, I'm just taking after Albert Einstein. So that is Knit Happens this week. Finally, it's time for tips, tricks, and hacks. And this week I want to talk about weaving in ends, because I hate weaving in ends. Well, I think we all probably hate weaving in ends. In fact, my old boss, she used to hate it so much. She would just leave her ends. She showed me like a pair of mittens she had, and she just had the ends just dangling because she hated it so much. I don't know why. I don't know why I hate it so much. But I've learned in doing the Master Knitter program, I've kind of learned some ways of weaving in ends that I don't hate it as much now. And so I'm wondering if it just like didn't really know proper ways of doing it before, or I think part of it might have been because I felt like I would weave in ends and they would always just work themselves back out. And so it just felt like one of those things that was frustrating and didn't work the way I wanted it to. So I wanted to do a little quick segment on weaving in ends. First of all, one suggestion I would make, if you are doing lace knitting, doing a Russian join is a great saver, because it's really hard to weave in ends on lace knitting because you have so many of your yarn overs and it's just really hard to find the right spot to get that perfect spot to weave it in. So a Russian join is great for that. I'm not going to go into great length on how to do a Russian join because there are better people that can explain it than me, but I learned it from watching a YouTube video by Michelle Hunter, who is Knit Pearl Hunter, and I will post a link below for that. But it is it's a great technique, and basically what you do is, so and this works in the middle of a row. I mean, typically we like to leave our ends at the ends of rows, but this will work in the middle of the row. In fact, you kind of really can't do it at the end of a row. And the way it works is, so let's say each of these fingers is like 2 different strands of yarn, and you want to put them together. You take your needle and you thread them together and you like weave them in so that they kind of lock together like this, and then it becomes one strand. This will work on just about any yarn that is multiple ply of yarn, and it does make your yarn a little bit thicker, so it can look a little, depending on the type of yarn, you can kind of notice it a little bit within your row. So you do just want to be conscious of that on whether or not you're going to use it. But in a lot of lace projects, it does work really well because you're not wanting to have to try to weave through yarn overs and holes and things like that. So I do like to use the Russian join when I'm doing lace projects. Also, the great thing about the Russian join is that then you don't have an end to weave in after your project. You're doing it in the middle of it. So that's another benefit to that one. So if you are going to weave in your ends, I'm going to show you some tricks that I have learned while working on the master's program. I have been watching a lot of videos from Arenda Holiday, and she talks about how the duplicate stitch is going to be the best method for weaving in ends. So the duplicate stitch is where you're basically following the trail of the yarn, the already knit yarn. You're going to be using your end to kind of follow that. So if you're doing it in stockinette, you're going to kind of just try and follow those little V's. If you're doing it in the reverse stockinette, you're going to follow those little bumps. And so by following the yarn, that is the best way to weave in the ends, the duplicate, using the duplicate stitch. Now, I think the biggest tip that I learned from her, the most helpful thing, is that she kind of mentions that we all know it's a big no-no to split your yarn in knitting, but this is the one case where it's okay. So if you are following the duplicate stitch, so I've got a reverse stockinette here, so I'm just going to kind of follow the yarn and weave it in through the little bumps. And so you would, start by putting it maybe in the little frownies and then follow back up, putting it through the little smileys and continuing along that path. And as you can see, I am actually using my needle to split the yarn as I thread it through those little bumps. And what this does is it allows it folds your yarn in along with the path of it folds your yarn tail in along with the path of your yarn. However, like if you pull it on the other side and you kind of stretch it out, then you don't see it. It doesn't, because it's not coming through to the other side. It's just kind of being split right in between. And the other great thing is if you're working with a wool, this is especially useful because it's not going to slip out. That wool is going to grip onto itself and it's going to hold it there. And so then you know that it's going to stay safe and snug right there, right within that, inside that little, that yarn. So I feel like now that I've kind of learned about that it's, or given permission, I guess. Isn't that kind of the way it is? Sometimes you just need to be given permission. Now that I've been given permission that it is okay to split the yarn when I'm weaving in my yarn tails, I find I don't mind it as much. I don't know why that is. Like I said, I don't know if it's just because now I don't feel like I feel like it's more hidden and I don't feel like it's gonna like work its way out. I don't know if that's why, but I don't mind it as much. It's still not my favorite task, but I don't mind it as much. And that's, you know, and I mean, if that's going to be the thing that gets in the way of me finishing a project, well, then I'm glad that I can appreciate it a little bit more now. So I hope this helps you out in weaving in yarn tails as well. And that's all I have in today's tips, tricks, and hacks segment. Alright, that's all I've got for you guys today, but thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me. I really appreciate it every time you guys come and check out one of my podcasts. It means so much to me. And if you liked what you saw here today, please like, subscribe, and comment below. It does a lot to help out for my channel. And you can also find me on Ravelry, Instagram, and Facebook, all as That MN Yarn Girl. I will see you next time, and in the meantime, I will leave you with a picture of cats and hats. Bye!